Okay, I heard you loud and clear. So this is an extended tour of a house that hasn't changed since the 1920s. Welcome again to Mr. Straw's house. Mr. Straw's house, otherwise known as Encliffe Villa, is a National Trust-owned property. Preserved at first by the family and then by the tenants who were left the house by the Straws, the National Trust then bought the house next door and opened the house up for people to come and visit. And although I've already done a video touring the house, I must apologise for my rushed narration. I've been very much used to short form content up until now, where people's attention spans are next to nothing. Plus, this wasn't a private tour. I bought tickets just like anybody else, and so I didn't have the house to myself, and so I didn't get as much footage of the house as I would have liked. But nevertheless, I'm going to do the tour again, but this time leave no footage off the table. So let's begin with the front garden. The Straws were very much into making their outside space a sanctuary and also purchased the apple orchard just across the road. Around the base of the house you can see some cacti, and that's because the family would grow their own cacti, which you'll see a bit more of later on. When you purchase tickets, you usually go around the house as a 4 and you have one guide. Our guide was brilliant, and we started off our tour by visiting the dining room. Upon their marriage in 1896, Florence moved in with William Sr. and initially lived above the Straws' shop. The family were grocers and moved to Encliffe Villa in 1923. And because the space was so much larger than they were used to, they ended up layering their carpet, which you can see in this room. But in 1932, everything changed when William Sr. passed away suddenly. And if there's one thing about this house that struck me, it's how they held on to their memories. And that's why you can still see William Sr.'s pipes hanging by the fireplace and his binoculars, as he was an avid bird watcher. The family had many hobbies and held them in very high regard. And even after the BBC began broadcasting in 1932, just a few years after the invention of the television itself, which by the 1950s became a popular household item, the Straws still preferred older forms of entertainment like sewing their own clothes, reading books and talking to each other. The next room on your right is Florence's parlour, which she would have used to entertain guests or to retire to after dinner. Behind the door is a chiffonier in which Florence would use to display her ornaments and elegant glassware. She was a woman of many talents, from drawing to needlework and teaching piano. She didn't make many alterations to this room other than overseeing the installation of French doors to replace the original sash window. And after her death, the guide told me that William Jr. used this space as an office and her piano as a filing cabinet. You may notice how dark the house seems, but I was told by the guide that the reason they have to keep all the curtains closed is to prevent sunlight damage for all the items inside. Nevertheless, I could see perfectly clearly how loved and lived in this house was. It was almost as though the family had nipped out for a moment, but any second now they would return through that front door and resume their lives. And that jacket you can see on the back of the chair belonged to William Sr. And apart from the wallpaper, everything in this house was pretty much in perfect condition, to say that it's all over 100 years old. And after taking a moment to appreciate the beauty of this original front door, I was told by one of the guides that one of these coats has not left that hook since the day that William Sr. died. And then we moved along to the kitchen, and that is when I instantly recognised something that felt ever so familiar. And that was this charming freestanding gas cooker featuring a plate warmer. And why was I so amazed by it? Well, it's actually the older version of the cooker that I own at home. A late 1940s new home cooker originally developed in Rainhill, Liverpool. This version actually still features in a museum in Liverpool. The Straws' kitchen is one of the only areas where the family kept a little bit more up to date. You can see a range cooker at the back there, and then the new home cooker is a more domestic model. And above the door, you can still see the board for the bell system, as a house like this would have usually featured a live-in maid. Then it was time to go up to the second floor via the traditional staircase, and I was told by one of the guides that the stair carpet is inspired by Egyptian hieroglyphics. And that's because Florence was a bit of a fashionista and very much into her interior design. Definitely a woman after my own heart. Up here we find the spare back bedroom, which was ordinarily used for guests, but over time became kind of a storage room after the grocer's shop closed in 1963. The photograph that you can see there on the dresser is actually the parents on a holiday in Scarborough. As I said before, the family cherished their memories and so took many photographs over their lifetime. And of course, a house like this is bursting at the seams with original features, including this cast iron fireplace. At the end of the hallway, we find an indoor bathroom, which was quite a luxury for a house of this age. It features a standalone bath, a system pull chain toilet, and some questionable linoleum, which I wager was added much later. Scooting along the hallway, it was time to visit the two main bedrooms, but along the way you could really feel the scale of this house with its high ceilings and big windows. I can imagine in its heyday it really was an impressive home, and I really did love that old grandfather clock. And although not the master bedroom, this was the room that William Sr. and Florence chose as their own, and I wonder if that's because it had a beautiful view of the garden. I was amazed at how little had changed in this house and how much the sons must have preserved it over the years. And that was just before noticing another very familiar sight. Yes, this is the moment I realised that I sleep in a bed pretty much identical to that of the Straws. And so, although not a historian, I put this bed at around 1890. And then we went to Walter's bedroom, which was a room I really loved, and again I felt strangely at home. I don't know whether it was because of the traditional eiderdown. Seriously, haven't these got expensive? I got mine for 20p from a jumble sale. Or perhaps it was the traditional oak wardrobe. Huh, will you look at that? Anyway, my favourite part of this room was this traditional fireplace because I just really loved the design. And then it was off to the third floor and we were going up another beautiful staircase that featured another gorgeous stair runner. I have no idea how these have been so well preserved with the amount of visitors this house must get. And I found out that William loved reading so much that he preferred to keep his clothes in a wardrobe on the landing rather than in a wardrobe in his bedroom. And that was basically so he had more room for his books and they were more easily accessible. This was a lovely, light and airy room, and then lo and behold, I found something else that reminded me of a home away from home. Oh, and another thing that me and some of the other people on the tour noticed is that there were so many chairs in these bedrooms. Like, one bedroom had 7 chairs in it. Anybody know why that might be? Around the rest of the house, you could see that any available space started to be used for storage, basically. And although these items weren't arranged in any particular fashion, it was a genuine treasure trove for your average vintage lover or anybody who is passionate about history. And then we took a moment to listen to some accounts from the people that used to work for the Straws.
Thursdays were closed at 1 o'clock.
I think this is their shop.
Had to be on the ball at 8:30, so we usually got there for about 15:15 and arranged everything ready for the first customers. And then at 6 o'clock we locked the door and had to start cleaning the weighing machine and wiping the counters in and what have you then.
I have to say, this was a really special part of the tour, and it really helped you understand who the Straws really were and how they treated their employees. And although she went on, it really felt like I was talking to like an auntie of mine just telling me about her day. It was just so charming, a real salt of the earth kind of woman.
Otherwise, you had just the rations.
This house was meant to have, wasn't it?
Bacon and so many eggs. No, it was absolutely.
It was now time to visit the garden space, which was a real highlight for me. And on the left there, you can see cacti that the National Trust sells, so you can purchase cacti of your very own. And although, as I said before, this is now split into 2 different houses, both the gardens were a really great size, filled with lots of plants and apple trees and outhouses, and if you followed a little path, you arrived at Mr. William Straw's very own greenhouse. An absolute haven of cacti, and the ones that you can purchase have actually been grown here, so it's kind of like you're taking a piece of the family home with you. We ended up calling our cacti William and Walter, and after a quick pot of tea, I reflected on the incredibly extraordinary and incredibly ordinary life of this family. And although they are long since gone, I was so privileged to see a glimpse into their lives and so proud of the National Trust for preserving this piece of history.